All right, so one of the things you can start doing is you can start working on decals, little graphics that you may want to include on your stuff. I think it's incredibly a kind of like meditative thing. Instead of going into something you're not terribly familiar with, going into something that you're somewhat familiar with and just kind of screwing around. So typically, like if I'm watching TV, I'll go into Illustrator and I'll draw up a hologram, or I'll draw up an interface, or I'll go in there and draw decals or whatever. Because they're very simple things and you can use them pretty much for any project that would require stuff like that. So this is one of the sheets that I made for this assignment, and they're just a bunch of random pieces. I'm not going to use all of these, but it's a good idea to have different iterations. If I decide that I wanted to add the name there, maybe I want to use it with lines, maybe I want the text underneath, maybe I want this, maybe I want just an R, maybe I want just different things, okay? It's a lot easier to pull from a library if you have it versus trying to create the stuff on the fly for every single piece. So that's typically what I'll do. This is a place where typically I'll get inspiration. Sometimes I'll go there and I'll actually buy stuff from this website. This is called Gumroad, and it's basically for people who have built stuff and they want to sell it. So if you've built textures or models or tutorials or anything like that, you can post it here, and the idea is that you sell it for pretty cheap. So this isn't really cheap, but if you look at some of these, this one is $6. So for for $6, you get 100 PNG decals and alphas that you can utilize for your textures. So if I'm doing something that's very clean, there's the clean version. If I'm doing something that's kind of scuffed up, there's a scuffed up version. Okay, so you can use these for a multitude of different projects. And for $6, it's not too bad. Their licensing scheme changes based off of who you are and what you're buying it for. It's not going to load apparently. Let's go to the next one. There it is. So if you're getting a single user license, this one is $5. It's at least $5. You can put 6 or 7 if you really like what the guy's done. You can get a team license, unlimited license, or educational license. Some of the people that are on here actually have a membership. So like during Christmas time one year, one guy had a membership for 20 bucks. Everything he ever releases, you get for free. And so I bought that for 20 bucks, and I have all these Photoshop brushes, all these ZBrush brushes, all these textures, different patterns and things that I utilize from his. But if you don't want to buy something for the assignment, obviously we shouldn't be buying stuff, we should be making it. But it's always good to kind of see what other people have done. I have a hard time paying, even if it is $5, paying for something like that, where it's like, well, I could just make that. You know, nothing inside of his images here I can't make. It's just a matter of the ease of stuff. When you get out in industry, sometimes you'll see that where they're like, all right, we have a deadline. You don't have time to illustrate stuff. Just here's the images, here's this, here's that. Especially for like models of cars and environment pieces. There we go. So there's a couple examples of these textures kind of in place at work, there and here. Okay. So I use it for reference. I use it for, to get some ideas, different things here. And then obviously Google you can use for reference as well. To start the label part, I just made a new document, 4096 pixels by 4096 pixels. I'm not going to be using Illustrator as my end product of this. This is simply housing all the images that I think I'm going to use. When I go to do my actual label on my drone, I'll pull off the ones that I think I want, put them on a different sheet, and then use those on the other sheet, or have separate ones for each one of those things, okay? So when I want, let's say, this one, I'll copy this whole thing, put it in a new file, save it as whatever that's called, and then use that, okay? So again, something you could just kind of sit there and just screw around with Illustrator and make some cool stuff. For the drone part of it, there's where my drone is currently at. So from last time to this time, that's where it's gone. I do like to do test renders all the time. So even as I'm building my stuff, I'm always looking at what the rendered version of it looks like. Sometimes you may add a division, you may add a detail, and when you render it, that detail doesn't come out. And so then I'll know I need to push it in a little bit more. Or as I'm working with stuff, something doesn't look right. The smoothing doesn't work, something doesn't work, and so I have to just go back in there. So this is a still image It's still rendering this. This is like a 4-hour thing because it's on progressive, so it's just going to keep going until I tell it to stop. So I'm going to tell it to stop now. So I did that. I also did a little 360 of it. It didn't finish, but again, just something so I can get an idea of what it's looking like from different angles. This is not fully textured at all. There's no texture on here except for a basic like metallic texture just to give it some highlights. But I'm looking to see if it looks good from other angles. Okay, so I do that, and then you can see my progression up here. Oh, I guess I got rid of that. Dang it. I purposely didn't close Cinema because I wanted to show the other ones, but they must have gotten rid of them or I deleted them or something. I don't know. All right. So I'm not going to go through every piece and how I did every single piece. I'm just going to go over the gist of how I did a lot of these pieces. So for something like the leg, which is basically, let's say, a cylinder shape, like that. I'm just going to get rid of the caps for now. All right. And I'm just going to put my caps on there. So you'll see there's a lot of techniques that will apply across the board to every single thing that you're going to do. So I'm just putting a cap on these just so that I have them capped. Come on. There we go. All right. So the legs, obviously, since the last lecture I extended them, that was simply just extruding it down, getting that basic shape. So it eventually, or it initially started off looking like this. And then I just go in and I start adding details. As you add divisions in these lines around your stuff, be wary of where it's adding those. If I add it here, that's not a huge deal. If I were to add it somewhere and then it adds a division all the way around my drone, that's going to be a big deal because that's going to start to take away other stuff that I may not want to add in yet. Here, it's very isolated to just this area. Okay, so if I wanted my leg to be kind of bent, I did that, and then I grabbed that area, and then I just nudged it over to, let's say, that side. Then I went back to my knife tool, and I'll add a couple divisions here. And I'm in face mode, and if I make sure my tolerance is on too, there we go. I'm just going to do an extrude inner. I'm going to turn off preserve groups so they're not connected. And then I'm going to do a regular extrude and then just push that in. And then this will give me some kind of like faceting on the outside of that. Now, this is one of those things where in the viewport, it's very difficult to see what's actually happening. So that's why I make the material, and this is basically, if you think of the environment assignment where we added that ambient occlusion, that's essentially what I do to all of my stuff. I go to color, I go here, I go to surface it, or effects, ambient occlusion. I'll leave it at the default, black, white. Then I'm going to copy it, take it over to luminance, because otherwise it's not really going to show up very good. And I paste it there, and I'll turn reflectance off for now. All right, so now when I render this, I can't see anything. You have to assign it. That always helps. There we go. All right. All right, so now I can see those details. Now, it's very difficult to see the black in there because of the scale of my scene. So I'm just going to jump into that ambient occlusion and just take this max distance up to, let's say, 500. And I have to do that on both of these. There we go. So you can see it a little bit better on there. Yeah, right? So that's what the purpose of using that. Also, maybe on the color, this might be a little bit too bright, so I'm going to pull the color down some. I'm sorry, not the color. On the luminance, I'm going to pull that down some. I think I need to maybe push this black further over. There we go. So it just helps kind of pull up that detail so I can see what it's looking like. Now, when we do something like this, and I'll turn my lines on so we can see this even better. When we do something like this, and then we go and smooth it out, what's going to happen is these things, which I'm trying to get to be nice and crisp, cornery edges type thing, when I smooth it, they're going to do that, and that looks pretty ugly. So I'm going to go back to my cylinder. I'm going to add a couple knife splits right here. Make sure I'm on edges. Go there. down here. Let me turn off my material because it's now difficult to see what's happening there. All right, so that changed nothing here, but then when I add my division, my subdivision, now you can see how these are more crisper, harder edges at the top and the bottom. Okay. So that was one thing that I added to mine and the other one. More stuff that I can do. I'm just going to add a little band right here. Let's make sure I'm on faces again. There we go. I'm going to just extrude this outward. Make sure my preserve groups is on. Make sure my max angle is up to an appropriate number so they all stay together. Do extrude inner. There we go. Yeah, I'll leave that on or off. And then push that in. There we go. The toggle for anything that is the top of this, so the subdivision surface is the top of all this. If I hit Q, it will toggle that on and off. So I can kind of hit back and forth to see where it's at, or not even have to go up here and try to mess with that. So there I can have these like little circles that are there. That might look kind of cool on the end product. Let's go here. Make sure I'm on the cylinder. If I wanted to add a hole in the middle of this, let's say I wanted to have like an opening, I'm going to put a little divider here between these. I'm going to get rid of this edge. I don't know why I put that one in. Just going to dissolve it. So I'm going to basically have a hole from this side straight through to the other side. So I'm going to go to faces here, and I'm just going to delete those two faces. So that one and this one. Okay, now there's a hole. I don't want it to be paper thin, so I'm going to hit right click and say bridge. And if you remember from the mini room, we did this on that where we were able to bridge edge to edge. There we go. And so now there's a hole that goes right through the middle of that. If I hit Q, again, we can see what it looks like. This looks weird being so soft. If this is plastic, it would be a nice smooth edge and then basically a little fillet or something. So I'm going to add some more edge loops. One there, maybe one here and one here. And the same thing up there. There you go. Much better. Okay, so literally if you just go in there and you start adding divisions and extruding stuff in and out, you can do a lot of really cool stuff with this kind of thing. All the stuff that you see, where are you at? There you are. On the legs here was done that exact same way. Turn that off. My camera, at this point, I don't know what Cinema is doing, but the camera is acting very weird. It's like on and off. So you can see the little panels I have here, those little ribs right there, all done the same way. This area was just divisions and scaled in. Oops. So if I add a couple divisions here, there, and let's say there, and then I go to my faces here and I just extrude this and push it in. And then maybe add some bevels around here, bevels around there. And now I'll have this little step kind of in that leg, so it again looks fancy. That's all I'm doing. I'm just adding bits of detail. I also have this little thing I pulled down, just another extrusion on there. The same thing with this little rib, another extrusion, just isolated those faces, extruded it out, added some bevels. This thing at the bottom, this is just a cylinder, adding divisions, extruding out different parts of it, and then adding edge loops, adding bevels to get it to look like a winch. This rope area, remember when we did the stuff up here with, wrong one, the lathe and the sweep, right? So I just did a sweep and I used two shapes. One of them was this helix, that's my rope, and then the other one was a circle, that's the thickness of the rope. And then just by moving some of the points of that helix, I was able to get this to drape around there. And then all this is just random pieces. This is a tube that I rounded off. This is a torus here. And then this is just a shape that I kind of started as a cylinder and then just started modifying the points to get that hook. All right. Now, all of the stuff that we've done, let's say on the leg, obviously will be cloned to all the other legs. They were all part of, in my case, all part of that same initial piece of geometry. If they were different pieces of geometry, like I'm going to show in the propeller, it's not a huge deal to get them to all those other spots. Let me go here, let me go here. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is my cloner, which is the Propeller Blades. This is my, no, oh, I didn't show that. There we go. I also have this little cavity here where I have these little grid things in there. And that was just a pipe. I limited the divisions, and I used a cloner to clone it so that it had that, and I just kind of stuck it into that little cavity that I created there. And then the rest of this is all just the propeller part, okay? So the way that I do the propeller is I just start modeling one of these pieces. So let me hide this stuff. And there's too much stuff. Cube, that's probably that. Yep. Null, you can hide that. Cloner, we can hide. Cylinder, we can hide. There we go. Okay. And then I need to rotate all this back to 0 because I animated it. All right. So for the propeller part, I started off with a cylinder, no caps on it. Remember, Cinema does that weird thing with the caps where it doesn't like lock them in. It's like two separate pieces. Then I'm going into the top view, and I'm just moving this over to where I want it. You'll see it's jumping around. That's because my snap is enabled. Remember, we have the snap down here, so I enabled it, and I turned on Vertex Snapping, Work Plane Grid, and Grid Line Point. So now it's locked into this, so as I scale it, I can verify that it's going to fit in that area that I've set up. You see my camera's like acting weird. I don't know what I did. Oops. And I just undid it so it moved back to there. Let me just do that, and then I'm going to delete my keyframes on here. There we go. So don't have to worry about that. All right, so there's my initial shape. I'm going to hit C. I'm going to turn snapping off. I'm going to scale this down slightly to fit better. Shrink this down. And then I'll just put a cap on this. Oops, too far. I want to not have so many divisions too. So let's put that to 12, I think will be a good number. Now I'll hit C. Now I'll go there to scale it. Now I'll add my cap. There we go. All right, so the motor is going to have two parts. One part is the actual motor housing. The other part is the part that gets to spin around, okay? They don't have to be accurate. They don't have to look like an actual, like, this is what a motor would look like. It just has to look like it could be that type of thing. Typically, a motor housing is a cylindrical shape. Like this. Okay, so something like that is typically what a motor housing would look like. And then this little stem that sticks up, that's the part that would spin around, okay? So I just have to make a cylinder basically like that, and then people would believe it. But obviously we want to make it look fancier, so I'm going to add a division, pull that up a little bit, add another extrusion here. All right, that looks fine. And then I'm going to duplicate this, and then this will be the shape of the part that would then sit on top. This is the part that would connect to that little stem and would spin around. And again, if you need to look at reference, make sure you go to the right window, and then you can look at reference. Propeller injuries, we don't want to look at that. On the Phantom, this is the DJI too, it looks like also. This little part snaps onto basically that little stem. Again, you could do something like that. I just like to go a little bit fancier and just kind of tuck the propellers into it. So I'm going to take this shape. I'm going to go to my knife split tool. I'm going to add some divisions. And the same thing I was doing on the legs, I'm going to do right here. So I'm going to go to my edges or my faces. I'm going to go to loop selection. I'll grab, let's say, these two, and I'll extrude those in. Now, I extruded it, nothing happened. I have turned on create caps, so it's actually creating a division as I'm extruding. I turn that off, and now it doesn't. Okay? The purpose of that is sometimes you do want to extrude something and still have that cap on the other side. If I had a cylinder and I extruded it, I would only get the one face, I wouldn't get the back face. So that's why I would have those two things on. So there's that piece. Maybe push that in a little bit more too. There we go. I could add bevels. I could add knife splits. So I'm just going to add some splits in here. All right. Now, before I go too far with this, I want to see what this is going to look like on all four of these things. So with the setup that I have here, I have my symmetry, and subdivision. And then I also have this symmetry group. When I hit C on that first one and it locked in that first symmetry, that created that group, which then I could just drop anything into, and then it'll automatically populate into those other spots. Okay? Just be careful of this because it's also going to be subdividing it because that's the top node. So just be aware of that as you go. So that's that part here. I think I do want to hit C so that I don't, or Q so I don't see that. Click this, yes. And I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. This is typically smaller than the motor housing altogether, so something like that. All right, so that'll be sufficient for what we're doing with this. Now I'm going to stick the blades in here, so I'm going to go to a cube. Again, you can look at reference for what you want the blades to look like. I'm going to create one blade and duplicate it all the way around. All right, so let's say that that's one blade. I can adjust the size after. I need divisions. If you look at any of the blades, they're not perfectly straight. They're going to be twisted, right? They have that twist to them. And they also have a thinness right here where they connect, and a thicker part, and then a thinner part again. So I want to include all of that stuff in my design of the blade. So I can do this by hand. I can grab divisions and manually push and pull them out. Definitely do that. Or I can do it the way that I'm going to show, which is using a couple of these, okay? Just so you can see what they would do. So first thing I need is divisions. So I'm going to go here and add some divisions. It's not showing me them. Let me go to my shading lines. There we go. Now we can see it. I only need divisions where it's going to be tweaked. So in the height here, there's nothing really deforming in the height. There's nothing really deforming going across this way. It's all in this big length. So I'm just going to add a couple divisions here, like, I don't know, 7 maybe. Then I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to, I believe it's bulge is the one I want. Yes. So I'm going to go to bulge. This will go underneath the cube because it is a purple deformer thing. And initially when it gets created, it's created down here at the origin. It's not going to do anything until I would hit fit to parent. Now that shape is around here. It might be hard to see on the projector, but that shape is all the way around this. And as I then go to strength and I tweak this, I can see that it's moving, okay? Now, another default thing is it's always in the wrong direction. So it's going side to side like that. I need to rotate it up and then do it again, and then it'll fit in the correct spot, okay? So I'll rotate this up to 90, then click on it, hit fit to parent again. Now when I do the strength, now you can see how it bulges that way or whatever. Okay. I'm also going to hit object, yes, unlimited. And what that allows me to do is drag this back, and then I can tweak where that shape is happening. So something like that seems like a pretty appropriate as far as the, smaller, bigger, and then smaller. That seems to work. I could also scale the box up if I needed to adjust those sizes. This I'm probably going to have to do by hand, just manually squish that down. So I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to go to current state to object. That creates a brand new cube. I can delete this one or back it up and save it. I already have one backed up, so I'm just going to delete it. Then I'm just going to size it down. It's way too thick, so we'll shrink this down. This part here needs to be scaled, so I'll grab the points and scale those in. And maybe these two. That's not scaling. There we go. And then maybe I'll also kind of squish that back a little bit. All right, good. It might be overall too thick, so we'll just scale this whole thing in. All right, so I can keep adjusting. All right, so now I need to twist it. Again, I could twist it by hand, grabbing each one of those edge loops and manually doing it, but there's a tool that allows us to do it. So I'm going to go here. This time I'm going to hold down Shift and then go to Twist. And what that automatically does is drop it underneath that list so that I don't have to worry about dragging it in and then hitting Fit to Parent initially. I'm going to have to hit it again anyway because it, again, does it in the wrong direction. Okay, that's not the right direction. So it just saves you a step. So rotate this 90, click on that again, Fit to Parent, and then there we go. Okay. Now, way too twisty. They don't twist that much. You want to be pretty subtle, so I'm going to go about 37 degrees. I think that's probably good. Yeah, that would be sufficient for that. I think I'm also going to take this twist and just scale it down slightly. Or not. I'm not going to scale it down slightly at all. Why didn't you work? I'm going to scale it down here. This is the biggest direction, so that's where it's going to be tweaked. There we go. And I'm also going to change that to within box. Or not. Maybe that's not what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll make the box bigger. There we go. So I made the box bigger so that it fit everything because part of it was sticking out. And then I just hold it within box. That way this part stays square. And then that part stays square also. All right, so that seems to work. Same process. I go to Objects or right click and say Current State to Object, delete the old one. And now I have this one, which is now my blade. And then the last thing I'm going to do to actually get this, if I smooth it out, it's going to look weird, just like the other stuff does. So divisions, divisions, divisions all over the place. And I'm just going to add a bevel to this. Again, I could add the edge loop or whatever I want. It's so close to being right there. Okay. And then just click a bunch of buttons, apparently. Click, 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 click. And then a little bit of a bevel. There we go. All right, so that should be pretty good. Now I'm going to take this, go to my top view, and line that up with where I want that to go. This is the part that I keep forgetting is which is my original one. So I'm going to turn off my subdivisions at the bottom right. There we go. And you'll see I accidentally moved my other one to the wrong side, so I have to fix that too. So I'll grab both of these cylinders, drag them over to the correct one, grab my cube, drag that over to the correct one. Oops, sorry, not yet. My cube I have to duplicate, so I'm going to go to Mograph Cloner. There it is, because I need multiple ones. I'm going to make this a radial. I'm going to change the plane to X and Z. Initially, I'm going to leave this at 4. I'll adjust it after. They're all rotated, so I need to go to Transform here and set this rotation to 90. And I believe it's actually negative 90 is how it worked out the last time. No, it was regular 90. It's this one I modeled correctly, apparently. All right. Now we'll go back to the cloner, go back to Object, take the radius up, and then there's my blades. Now once I have this, I know all 4 work. I can go into my count and make as many blades as I want, obviously within reason, right? I'll also probably need to adjust the scaling of this. If one of my blades gets too close to the other blades, they'll obviously break. We don't want that, so I have to shrink that down. but we'll tweak it. So I'm going to leave this at 4, or not 4. OCD wants an even number. Art wants an odd number. It's very weird. All right, so now I'm going to move my cloner into that bottom right corner. And this has to be accurate. In order for us to be able to spin that entire fixture and the propeller, those two things have to be lined up. If one of them is off, we'll actually like wobble the propeller when we animate it. So this is my cylinder here. There is my cloner. It might be difficult to see, but I'm going to turn my snap back on and just kind of move this over. If I need to, I can move it over here. This is just a random grid line that's lined up. I'll take my cylinder and also randomly move that over there. Now they're both perfectly lined up. I'll drop this into my symmetry. I will grab the cloner, grab this, and group them. And now I can move them both all the way over here. And then verify that it looks like it's pretty much lined up. And it's not. I missed it. You can see I missed it right there. If it helps, I can start turning things off. Maybe I should turn off the drone itself. There we go. All right, so I'm looking at the space here. I'm looking at the space there. I'm going to turn my snap off and just nudge that back down. Actually, that is good here, and this is good there. Okay. So now I'm looking at this line and that line are lined up. These two lines are lined up. These two are lined up. And then this is lined up with that one. So that should be exactly in the center. If I go to rotate and rotate it, it's rotating perfectly centered. Good. Okay. So now I can turn my drone back on. That's not my drone. Turn my drone back on here. Turn my symmetry back on. Turn my smooth back on. And now I have that. Okay, and if I decide I want to come back later to that cloner and make, that's not the right cloner. It's under null, no, it's under this null, this cloner, and then there's 8. Now this is why you may not want to do that initially, because of the speed. Every time we hit something, it's going to just go slower and slower. So as I'm working, maybe I even take this down to 2, or maybe I even disable it. And then once I'm ready, I'll come in and adjust how many I have at the very end. Okay. So let's put this at 5. I have plenty of room here. This line in the middle is the closest that they're going to come. There's a lot of space here. So I'm actually going to make this thing a bit bigger. Whenever you have a cloner and you have an object under it, if you zoom in, you'll be able to see kind of like a wireframe version. If you don't like that, just turn the cloner off, and then you can see the actual object. You'll still see that one, and then you could just adjust, let's say, the scale of it. There we go. Turn the cloner back on. I may need to adjust the radius here. Keep going, right there. And I do have it backwards, see? No one, transform, -90. There you go, that's better. All right, so now as I'm in my top view here, I'm looking at where these are going to hit. I'm going to test it out real quick and just rotate. So close, but they don't hit, so it's good. Sweet. Right? So that's how you can make those. Now the other stuff that I had in mind, let me hide my null here so I can bring back the other one I have, is I have this on here. This is simply just a cylinder. I've extruded it and extruded it and extruded it to get the shape that you currently see. Okay, and if I look at just the non-smoothed out version, you can see how that's all lined up nice and neat to get it to go in there. It's not connecting anywhere, it's just kind of like wedged into that. That's fine, you can do that too. I could have also extruded faces out of that, but I just didn't want to mess with that geometry. And this looks like it is off, so I need to move that whole setup there over. There's my other blades. And I also did, in this case, I did a top piece. There it is. So in this one, I did just this little top like cap piece that would sit on top where the blades are kind of like underneath it. Okay, many different designs that you can have. There's not just like one only. Okay, I could have also connected these. If you look at some drones, they actually have this guard that goes around and all the guards are connected into one. If it broke, I think that'd be a really costly replacement, so just keep them separate. I have these little arms on here. This is the same thing I did with the putting a hole in it. I just extruded out and kind of got it close, deleted the faces, and then bridged between all the faces, and then made sure it blended nicely from one to the other. It looks kind of neat, as long as you see it. When it's on this side, you kind of like, what is it even doing? Same thing on the bottom here. This isn't connected anywhere. It's just kind of like wedged into that spot. And that's pretty much it, okay? So this is pretty much as far as the drone modeling part needs to go. You can go further. If I wanted to add a battery pack or I wanted to add something, I could do that. I would do that the very, very end part of this. I'll save that for another day after we have some time to process this and get more of our modeling done. But basically, after all the symmetries and subdivisions are done, that's when that battery pack would go in, because it's basically a very fine line that would go around it. Another thing that could be kind of neat to have on here is a seam line. Typically, there's two pieces of plastic that would click together, and there's usually a seam that runs around the entire thing. And I could add that seam line going around this entire thing. Again, something I would probably save until after the entire model was all put together, add the seam line in so that we have this little like indent. But that would look cool. It would give it a little bit of detail on there. I could also do, even though there would be no real point to it, pretending that these legs could move. There would be some sort of hydraulic or something that's kind of pushing or pulling it. I can model a hydraulic and connect the two pieces of the leg together. Even if I don't have them move, it could still look like a cool addition or cool detail to add to this model. Okay, so there's lots of different things that you can do. It's just a matter of figuring out what it is you want. This one has like a little bubble around the lens. That seems kind of weird to even have, because it would distort it or something, right? Get grass on it? I don't know, it's weird. This one here, there's screw holes. We wouldn't want to put screw holes on this, maybe at the very, very end stage if we needed to. Realistically, we're not going to see the underside of these. We will see stuff if it's hanging off, but we won't see like the actual like this part of it. So there's not a huge amount of necessary detail we would need to add for that. And there you go. You can see all the different blades that they have. 12x4, 12x5. No, those are all just blades. And that's all they sell here is blades, apparently. All of the products, propellers, ranges. Yeah, that must be all they sell. Cool. All right, so once you get to the end of the first video, obviously you can add more detail to it. This is just random pieces you may need, you may not need. Obviously, at least the propeller part you'll have on there. You don't need the guards. You don't need to add any fancy leg stuff at the bottom. Eventually, you're going to be creating a demo reel for yourself to go out and show the world. The more detail you can add to these projects while you're in class, the easier it is when you get to that portfolio class and you're putting stuff together and actually have finished pieces versus not having finished pieces that you have to go back and try to figure out how to use cinema again because you haven't touched it in 6 years or 2 years. Cool. Questions?